Some of us are continually haunted by a sense that we are losers. It's not a fleeting thought, but a persistent, low-grade hum of inadequacy that colors our entire experience of life. On the surface, things might look perfectly fine. Acquaintances may speak well of us, colleagues may praise our work, and our loved ones might tell us we're wonderful. But there's an inner critic inside, a relentless voice that has a very different and much louder verdict. You are a piece of nonsense. You're a fraud. You're laughable. You're repulsive. This critic is the voice of imposter syndrome, the architect of our anxieties. It is extremely assiduous and determined. In its own dark way, it is a world champion of self-deprecation. It will get into a fierce argument with our best friend, mentally refuting every kind word they say to insist that, no, despite their loving perspective, we really are awful. It will meticulously disregard the concrete evidence of a promotion, a successfully completed project, or a surprise birthday party thrown in our honor. Instead, it sifts through our memories, cherry-picking every mistake, every awkward moment, every perceived failure, and keeps returning to its single, brutal theme. You are fundamentally flawed. You are repulsive. So, the great question is, why? Why does this inner critic exist? Why is it so remorseless, so immune to logic and evidence? If it is so clearly inaccurate and destructive, why does it continue to hold such power over us? To find a meaningful explanation, we have to journey back in time to the earliest days of our emotional lives. Let's posit the following scenario, a situation common to so many of us with a harsh inner critic. Early on in our lives, we faced a deeply troubling and confusing situation. Someone close to us, a primary caregiver upon whom our very survival depended, might have been a mother or a father didn't seem to especially like us. Perhaps they were cold and forbidding, consistently unavailable emotionally. Perhaps they often got angry, their moods unpredictable and frightening. Or perhaps they simply disappeared, they left the family, married someone else in another country. Or they were physically present but emotionally absent, lost in the fog of their own depression, anxiety, or addiction. For the small child we once were, this was a catastrophe of the highest order. The central question that would have dominated our small world, even if we couldn't articulate it, was why? Why is this happening? Though we may forget this as adults, it is psychologically impossible for a child to deal with a vacuum of explanation, especially when it concerns their own safety and sense of love. The human mind, even a very young one, abhors a mystery. It has to try to find some way of accounting for things, because otherwise, the chaos and uncertainty threaten to be completely unbearable. In this situation, any answer feels better than the terrifying abyss of no answer at all. Unfortunately, the childish mind doesn't have an accurate grasp of the complexities of adult psychology or the workings of the grown-up world. A child cannot comprehend that their parents' coldness might stem from their own unresolved trauma, or that their anger is a product of immense stress, financial pressure, or mental illness. A child's world is fundamentally egocentric. They're the center of their own universe, and so it is only natural for them to assume that major events, especially those involving their caregivers, revolve around them. So, this energetic and vibrant little mind, in its desperate search for an explanation, eventually lands on one that feels incredibly powerful and, most importantly, offers a sliver of control. In time, this explanation becomes so deeply embedded that it ceases to feel like a guess and instead feels like an iron truth. And that explanation runs as follows. The bad thing that has happened to me has done so because I am bad. Father has left home because I suck. Mother is constantly angry and screaming because I am unlovable. My sibling is getting all the attention because I am not good enough. We must state this with absolute clarity. This is almost certainly not the correct answer to why things unfolded as they did. But that isn't the point. The point is that this was the answer we landed upon, the one that felt most plausible to a small child trying to make sense of an unbearable reality. A child will always prefer to believe they live in a rationally ordered world where things happen for logical reasons even, if it means accepting the devastating conclusion that they themselves are bad. This is far less terrifying than the alternative. The notion that the universe is chaotic, that terrible things happen for no reason at all, that pain can be inflicted unfairly, and that the people who are supposed to love and protect them are unable or unwilling to do so. Better to insist that I suck than to believe in an immoral, senseless, and terrifying world. Believing I am the problem offers a desperate, tragic hope. If I am the problem, maybe I can be good enough to fix it. From here, it is painfully easy to see the direct line. The child who, as a survival mechanism, had to conclude that they sucked in order to make sense of an unbearable pain, then grows up. This conclusion, this core belief, doesn't just disappear. It becomes the foundational programming of the adult psyche. This is the person who continues to maintain, in the face of all evidence to the contrary, that they are dreadful. The person for whom all good news is merely a temporary reprieve, a cover for the hatred they believe is just around the corner. The person who feels that everything nice is undeserved and that they are, despite degrees and promotions and loving relationships, fundamentally a piece of excrement. So, how do we break out of this prison we unknowingly built for ourselves? The way forward is not to fight the critic, but to understand it. The path to freedom begins with the realization that we are made up of parts. The inner critic is not the whole of you. It is a part of you, a part that was formed very early on in response to a specific, painful situation. The first step is to create space between you and the voice, to move from being the critic to observing the critic. When the voice starts its familiar litany, you're going to fail, they all think you're an idiot, try not to get swept away by it. Instead, take a mental step back and say, there is the critic. I hear it. By simply noticing it as a phenomenon, you begin to reclaim your power. The next step is to engage with this part not with anger, but with a surprising degree of compassion. We can now look back and thank it very politely for its work, because at an early critical stage of our lives, it did, in fact, do a rather good job. It constructed a narrative that, at a great personal cost, allowed us to survive an overwhelming reality. It was responsible, we might say, for getting us to the next stage. It tided us over. It was a very clever, if flawed, strategy for a 6-year-old. So we can afford to take our leave of this helpful, but now profoundly mistaken part. We can have a gentle, internal conversation. Thank you, inner critic, we might say. I recognize that you were born to protect me from a world that felt chaotic and scary. You did something bold, and you meant well. But I am an adult now. I have new tools, a greater understanding, and a support system you couldn't have imagined. Your old strategy, while once necessary, now threatens to ruin what remains of the rest of my life. It is time for me to take it from here. It's time to say goodbye to the critic's monopoly on the truth and begin to assess reality through a fairer, less biased, and far more informed lens. Your new job is to become a compassionate investigator of your own life, actively seeking evidence that contradicts the critic's old story. Keep a journal of your successes, no matter how small. Write down every compliment you receive and force yourself to read it later. Acknowledge your efforts, not just your outcomes. Because the truth is this, we don't suck. Something awful happened to us. We aren't bad. Something bad happened to us that our child self tried to rationalize by blaming ourselves. We aren't awful people, and we absolutely do not deserve an awful future. We just came from a rather difficult place. This realization is not about erasing the past, but about rewriting our relationship with it. It's about gently taking the pen from the hand of that frightened child and, as the capable adult you are today, beginning to write a new chapter. The voice of the critic, once a thunderous roar, can finally fade into a distant whisper. In its place, a kinder, more patient voice can emerge, the voice of your authentic self, which has been waiting to be heard all along. It's time to step out of the shadows of a story you never chose and into the light of a future you are now free to create, one built on compassion, acceptance, and the beautiful, undeniable truth of your worth. If this message resonated with you, and you're ready to continue this journey of self-discovery and healing, please know that you are not alone. We explore powerful ideas like this every week to help us lead wiser and more serene lives. Please consider subscribing to our channel and joining a community of fellow travelers on the path to a kinder, more authentic future. Thank you for watching.